Eagles Entertainment.
With the 15th pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, presented by Life Brand. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and day one of Senior Bowl practice is officially in the books from Mobile, Alabama. We're going to start things off with Pick 6, where Dane Brugler, my friend, is going to drop by to break down the 6 players that stood out most to him over the first day of practice. We took in American practice, national team practice. We're going to break it all down. Dane's got his top 6 players from the day. We'll break it all down at the very top of the show. After that, we're going to go into our draft mailbag segment, where C-Mac and I, Chris McPherson, we're going to break down a bunch of your questions that you guys submitted in on Twitter, but also we got a couple of takeaways from C-Mac and I as well. So we'll get into all of that in draft mailbag. As always, make sure you head on over to our Apple Podcast page. Leave us a rating, leave us a review. If you're not already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and you get the Journey to the Draft podcast sent to your podcast device each and every time we drop a new episode. So that said, excited to get things started here, breaking down all the action from Mobile, Alabama. It's time for Pick 6 with Dane Brugler.
Now it's time for Pick 6.
All right, excited to start things off here with Pick 6 as I welcome in our friend Dane Brugler. Dane, the Senior Bowl is underway. A little bit more of a normal year this year. You obviously were here last year. I took the year off due to COVID-19 in 2021, but excited to be back in Mobile. Excited to be talking through day one of practice with you.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's after the last few days of meetings and different networking things. It's fun just to be in the stadium, watching practice, watching the on-field action. And this is why we come down to Mobile every year, is to see these guys in action on the field. I thought several guys helped themselves. It was a good first day of practice, and hopefully we have a couple more as the week progresses.
Yeah, some rain in the forecast here for the next couple of days. Hopefully things are able to stay dry enough for us to be able to take in practice. But that said, let's get into what we saw here on Tuesday afternoon. 6 players that stood out to Dane Brugler. We'll start with number 1. Who's the first name that pops to your mind?
I think I got to go with Travis Jones, the defensive tackle from UConn, who, just a monster human being, 6'4" and 3/8, 326 pounds. 34-inch arms. And, I think when you think of this draft and you think of a two-gapper who is dominant versus the run, everyone's going to think of Jordan Davis from Georgia, who is not here. But if you want a guy like that on day 2, Jones might be your guy. And he showed why during practice today. Big bodied player. You see that play strength. It's a developed play strength. He's quick off the ball. He's powerful at the point of attack. So he showed not only the ability to anchor versus the run, and blockers aren't moving him, but also he got a little bit of push on pass rushing reps. And so Travis Jones, I thought, was kind of a man amongst boys at times during one-on-ones and during team drills. I thought he really helped himself.
I know I did not watch the O-line, D-line one-on-ones, but in team, he did have a couple of run stops at the line of scrimmage. I was actually glad that you brought that up, because I was going to ask you, in which drill was he most impressive to you?
Yeah, I think all around, it was just a strong day for him. And it's tough for a player like this. This is why the Senior Bowl is just a great opportunity, because, at UConn, he didn't necessarily get to show this all the time. And so being down here in this type of setting, he's really able to shine. And, UConn's got a couple of draftable players this year, and Travis Jones has a legitimate chance to be a day 2 pick.
Yeah, I think when you look at his body of work, everyone was really excited about Travis Jones coming into the year. He did not play a year ago because UConn opted out of the entire season as a team. They just said, as a team, they completely just bowed out. So kind of an interesting case study here with Travis Jones. As you mentioned, big opportunity for him here this week. Who's number 2 on your list?
I'm going to go to the offensive side of the ball. Jeremy Ruckert from Ohio State, the tight end, 6'5", 250. And, I think that not enough is being made of the possibility that this could be tight end 1 in this draft. I think there's a legitimate race when you talk about, the Colorado State, you talk about Texas A&M, you talk about the tight ends in this class. It's a really, in terms of depth, a really strong group, group. But I think at the top guy, the first tight end drafted, it's not set in stone. I think there's some really good contenders there. And Jeremy Ruckert, he's right up there. And I think he showed why during practice. Really smooth routes, really smooth catching the football. He's bigger than, Trey McBride and some of these other tight ends that are down here. He showed off the ball skills. Now it's something, coming from the Ohio State offense where, they use the tight end a lot, but just not in the passing game as a target. I mean, he's used as a blocker quite a bit. And down here, he's able to show these ball skills. There's one throw from Carson Strong that was at a shoot tops. He pulled it up.
Outstanding catch.
Finished it to the ground. Yeah, the body control, the ball skills, the focus. I mean, he showed that. And, there were several other opportunities where he was able to break free from coverage, give the quarterback a window. So, I think he's a player that has a chance to be a top 50 pick. And I think he'd be right there and contend for that tight end 1 designation.
When you talk about guys able to help their stock, a case like Ruckert, where he wasn't used in that area all that often, where it could be a defensive lineman who now can get after the quarterback and just rush the passer, a running back in pass protection, a linebacker in coverage. You can go down the list at different positions, but a tight end being put on display to be able to catch the football, huge opportunity for Ruckert this week. And I agree, really stood out in a number of the reps here, catching the football here on Tuesday. Let's get to number 3. Who's number 3 on your list?
Dominique Robinson from Miami of Ohio, the pass rusher, who, again, another great story, quarterback in high school, goes to Miami of Ohio as a wide receiver. And 2020, during the pandemic, he transitions to pass rusher. 0 starts on his resume, but he comes down here to Mobile, and he looks like a guy that is going to contend for the top 100 picks. Twitched up athlete, and he showed it during practice, burst off the snap. He challenged the corner on every single play. You see bend, you see body control, you see dip, you see all the different ways he can maneuver his body and beat blockers. That was on full display today. He's an older player. He's going to be 24 years old during the summer. But in terms of football years, in terms of defensive football years, he's still very young. He's still figuring things out. Which makes him really intriguing as a prospect. And, you saw the athleticism today. It's, for 6'4" and 5'8", 254 pounds. So he looks the part. He doesn't look like a former receiver trying to play pass rusher. He looks like a pass rusher who's been doing it for, a long time. And so Robinson, during practice, he looked like he belonged and looked like a guy that was ready to kind of make a name for himself.
I didn't watch the O-line, D-line, but the in team drills, he popped. I mean, he had a couple of those wins so fast, which, I mean, you would expect for a guy with his athletic profile. But as you mentioned, this is a very much a developmental player. 0 starts along the defensive line over the course of his career. He came off the bench the last 2 years as kind of a situational pass down only player. But he's got the juice to be able to get after the quarterback, and he showed that here today. A really good showing there from Robinson. Let's get to number 4.
So again, from the first practice, go with Zion Johnson, who is one of the best players down here. Simple as that. It was interesting. They played him at center, and this is a position he's never played before. He played guard, he played tackle in college, but he had never played center. And so there were a few miscues in terms of snapping the football and just the whole mechanics of playing center. But I thought that he did pretty well considering he's never played the position. And then during one-on-ones when he was at guard, I thought he was outstanding. He was one of the few guys that was able to slow down Travis Jones, who we just talked about from UConn. The play strength is outstanding. And you see that length. I mean, he came in at 6'2 3/4", 314 pounds, but almost 34-inch arms. He has the length of, a tackle, but he's able to use that at guard and use that against some of the more powerful defensive tackles that he goes against. Zion Johnson, you look at his journey, playing basically 1 year of high school football, going to Davidson, that triple option offense they ran there, non-scholarship, transfers to BC so he could be on scholarship, and he just really came into his own at the FBS level, playing against better competition. He's coming down here, and he's one of the best players in this game, one of the best seniors in this draft, has a chance to be a first-round pick. And I think nothing happened today to really change that thinking.
he absolutely looks the part. I mean, just to watch him, the way that he's put together. You talked about his length. He really looks good on the hoof. I want to ask you too. You talked about Zion Johnson getting those looks at center. Luke Gedeke from Central Michigan.
Yep.
He also got some looks at center as well. I know he left practice early with an injury, but we saw this last year with guys like Robert Hainsey. We've seen a couple other linemen over the years get those looks at center. There were a couple balls on the ground today with the QB center exchange, but good to be able to see these guys get those reps here in some live action.
It's just not a strong center group this year.
Right.
And so because of that, we are seeing some guys try to show their versatility. Cole Strange, another one from Chattanooga, who, not a natural center, or that's just not his background. But he stepped in, and you gotta respect the no gloves. Looked great out there. I thought Cole Strange, I could have easily picked him as one of the six today. I thought he handled himself pretty well. There were a few times, especially at center, where Travis Jones got the best of him, or maybe it just wasn't perfect. But he's a guy that he's a brawler out there, and another guy with a great story. He was a high school defensive end who moves the offensive line at college at Chattanooga, and you throw on his Kentucky tape this past year, and it's like, okay, I see why he's at the Senior Bowl. I see why this is a chance to be a player who's drafted in the first 4 rounds. I think if there's a Quinn Miners here this year, who last year from Wisconsin Whitewater kind of blew up and moved up 3 or 4 rounds for some teams. If there's a guy like that in this draft, it might be Cole Strange.
Let's get to number 5. Who's number 5 on your list here?
So let's move to the afternoon practice. And you know what? I'm going to go with the running back. And it's tough for these running backs, like we've talked about, to really stand out. But I thought Dameon Pierce from Florida was able to do that. And
definitely.
Look, this is not going to come as a surprise to anybody that's watched Pierce's college film, but he was running with attitude all practice, every single rep. During these drills, he was consistently on schedule. And that's something with running backs is sometimes especially in the first practice, just the cadence, the timing of these drills, running backs, might be a little bit off. Pierce was always on schedule. He's flying through holes, delivering pop at contact. And then most importantly for backs during the Senior Bowl, I thought he did a really nice job in pass pro drills, setting his feet, framing the rusher, staying connected. He has that NFL build. He's 5'9", 220, but because he is 5'9", he's able to leverage that point of attack, stay underneath blocks, and create a little bit more, and not just anchor, but create a little bit of knockback as well. So I thought Dameon Pierce really did a nice job in the first practice.
Do you think it's fair to say that this group of running backs here in Mobile is one of the better ones since you've been coming? I think I would say that about, I've been coming to the Senior Bowl since 2012 now. And I feel like this is one of the better groups from top to bottom of talent at the running back position.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And, we had a few guys, even like a James Cook is not here, not able to play. Hassan Haskins, not able to play. But Brian Robinson, Dameon Pierce, I thought Abram Smith looked good today from Baylor, Rashad White from Arizona State, Beatty from Missouri. So, yeah, I think you're right. It is a good group of running backs and a group of running backs that can do some different things. Beatty catching the ball at the backfield. And, I thought Abram Smith did a nice job in pass pro. So, throw Quan White in there as well from South Carolina.
No doubt.
It definitely an interesting group of backs.
All right, well, let's round it out. Who's number 6 on your list here?
All right, so I saved the best for last. Jermaine Johnson. He just looked like a guy that wants to be a top 15 pick in this draft during the first day of practice. 6'4" 3/8", 259 pounds, almost 34.5-inch arms, relentless power, relentless attitude during reps today. It's clear that he knows what he's doing out there. He's not just a ball full of skill and traits, just kind of throwing everything out there. There's nuance to what he was doing. There's natural instinct to his pass rush. Love the way that he plays behind his punch. So he allows that length to work for him. And then he'll break out a power rip. He'll break out a long arm move. He's got an effective spin move. So when you put it all together, the length, the power, the quickness, if you're a blocker in space and one-on-ones, you just say a prayer before you go up against Jermaine Johnson in one-on-ones, because he is that dude in this draft. And I think coming into this week, Trevor Penning was my top ranked player. Bernard Raymond was number 2. Jermaine Johnson was number 3. Johnson played like a guy that read that tweet was like, really 3? Okay, just wait. And he wants to be one on that list. And based on one practice, I'd say he's doing a nice job trying to prove me wrong.
And then the practice ended today with Deuce Staley, the head coach of the Detroit Lions of the American team, having some high leverage one-on-one reps where he pitted Jermaine Johnson going up against DK Kennard from Kentucky. And Johnson got the better end of those reps with all eyes in the stadium on those two.
Yeah, and credit to Kennard, because that last rep, he did a nice job resetting. Yep. And, Kennard really wants to stay at tackle. He played, I think every rep at tackle today. Yep. None a guard, which is notable. And so he wants to be a tackle. And I thought, that last rep, he did a nice job. But yeah, Johnson, there's just only so much you can do. And especially in those one-on-one situations where a guy like Johnson can beat you in so many ways, whether it's with power, with quickness, unlock that length that he has. And so, yeah, Jermaine Johnson, he started strong, finished strong. We'll see if he can sustain it throughout the week.
It'll be something very interesting to talk about. Jermaine Johnson, certainly one of the brighter stars down here in Mobile. Dane, thanks so much, and we will talk to you tomorrow here on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the Draft Mailbag.
All right, well, time to wrap the show up with our draft mailbag as I welcome in Chris McPherson. C-Mac, day 1 of practice in the books. We've already talked about it with Dane and with Brandon. Get your thoughts here on the first day of practice down at in Mobile.
It's great for me because I'm coming in with a relatively clean slate. You hear some of the background stories on some of these guys, and you know that. And obviously, you and Dane and Ben have talked about some of these guys on the Journey to Draft podcast and the On the Clock segments throughout the course of the season. But it's my first opportunity to see a lot of these guys, in action for the first time, especially up close and personal, like we get to do here in Mobile.
So basically, after practice ended, I put out a quick Twitter post, just solicited for a handful of questions, and I picked some of the best ones and kept them for this segment. But I also want to ask you a couple of questions, and if you've got any questions, we can kind of go back and forth here. But the one thing I wanted to ask you first, was there one play from today's action that stood out to you? And of course, make sure all of our listeners go check out our practice notes, which should be up by the time you're listening to this podcast on PhiladelphiaEagles.com. If you go to the mobile app, any digital channel, you'll see C-Mac and I posted our practice notes, our big takeaways. But C-Mac, is there one individual play that stands out most to you from Tuesday's 2 sessions?
I got to pick one. I'm going to go. Okay, let's go to the second practice, the afternoon practice. It's the American team in action. I'm going to go with edge rusher Kingsley Enagbare, and he was absolutely dominant during the team period. Now, I don't know which guys you and Dane have discussed to this point, but Enagbare, there was one rush where he's coming off the quarterback's line side, coming off the right edge of the defense, and he was in the backfield so quickly he had to literally stop. It was one of those situations where he knew. Now, we saw some instances in the earlier practice of the quarterbacks, getting hit, getting a little too close for comfort there with the pass rush. But on this instant, Enagbare knew immediately to pull up. He was just in the backfield. He was like, I could pull out a chair, watch the rest of the play from here. That one stood out to me. I would also go to the end of practice, the competitive period they had at the very end, where you had Jermaine Johnson from Florida State and it was Dane Kennard of Kentucky. And on the very first snap, Johnson just flat out knocked Kennard to the ground. Now, they ended up doing 3 total reps in all. Johnson worked a spin move, and I thought he got the second rep. But on the third one, Johnson went back. It's almost like a cat and mouse. Which move is he going to go with? He went back to the spin move. Kennard held his ground. And they gave the offense the win for the session. So all the players on defense had to do push-ups at the end. So a couple of pass rush standouts there. I'll let you go with your play of the day. I know you wanted one, and I was just kind of going on there.
You gave us a couple of plays there. I think for me, I spent a lot of the day watching wide receiver DBs. The way I typically approach Senior Bowl, obviously, look, as one person, you're not going to take in everything, and you know this. But for our listeners, to me, like, I think it's almost it's unfair to you, the listeners, who aren't here, to say that me as one person took in all of practice, and you'll never see me write a piece where it's like the biggest winners and the biggest losers and risers and fallers, because NFL teams, that's not the way they operate. We talked earlier this week on the show about how NFL teams go about you have one person that is in charge of watching a handful of players, or one position group. For me to say, like, this is the big winner or the big loser, we're never going to approach it that way. But I think, to me, I try and say, okay, today I want to focus in on skill guys. On Wednesday, I'm going to focus in on trench players. On Thursday, I'll focus in on the combo guys, and just trying to approach it that way. That said, I spent most of today watching wide receivers and DBs, and Tariq Castro-Fields, the cornerback from Penn State, a former high school teammate, by the way, of Eagles cornerback Zach McPherson, made an absolutely outstanding play down the field in wide receiver DB one-on-ones. He was beaten early on the play by Alec Pierce, who he's got that long speed. This is the receiver from Cincinnati, big body kid who can run, and he was a vertical threat for Desmond Ridder over the course of his career. Pierce ran a vertical route down the left sideline. He beats Castro-Fields early, but as you talk about at corner, it's about that competitiveness, that ability to recover. And I thought that Fields did a nice job of not panicking, got into the receiver's hip pocket, and at the point of truth, at the point where the ball had just arrived at Alec Pierce's hands, you saw Fields go up, take the ball away from Alec Pierce, and come down with it in the end zone. Just a ridiculous play down the field for the interception in the end zone. It was probably like a 45-yard pass down the field. Just a ridiculous play on the opposite side. So I'm excited to go back and watch that one. But I would say that was the play of the day for me in the practice sessions that I took in.
What did you describe it? The point of truth?
The point of truth, when you're talking about the receiver, or rather the corner, when you've got that a bit, because we all know what it looks like when a corner doesn't get his head around in time, or there are times where the corner gets his head around too early, right? So that timing is really, really, obviously really, really important. And to me, I will always call that the point of truth, where it's like, all right, this is going to determine the outcome of this play. I thought Castro-Fields played that very, very well.
I like that. I have a note from Castro-Fields in 7-on-7 with a nice pass breakup along the sideline on a pass intended for Christian Watson from North Dakota State as well. So nice outing for Castro-Fields there overall in the day.
All right, well, let's get to our first Twitter question. This one comes from Ben McCardle. Question is, any hints of someone who is climbing draft position even after just one day? So, again, going back to what I said a little bit earlier, I'm not going to say, oh, yeah, this guy, his stock is rising based off what he did today, these handful of reps. For me, C-Mac, one pair of players I wanted to kind of point to, the national team. They've got a couple linebackers there that I thought really stood out. Chad Muma was working as the middle linebacker with that first unit. Troy Anderson from Montana State, he was working as the Sam linebacker. When they went into base, he was like the second team Mike, and you saw him kind of calling the defense as well. But I thought Chad Muma and Troy Anderson showed up in a lot of different ways. There were a lot of perimeter run plays from that offense, and I thought Muma and Anderson did a great job of staying square to the line of scrimmage, tracking. You saw some really good run-throughs from Muma running through the alley. You saw Anderson playing through contact. So those two linebackers kind of living up to the billing. We talked about them a lot over the last few weeks leading up to this event, and I thought Chad Muma and Troy Anderson really showed up well. So in terms of guys that I just kind of flashed to me, that would be my answer to that question. I don't know if you've got somebody as well.
I do. I want to follow up on Muma real quick. I actually got to ask him after practice about what it's like coming to an all-star game where you're coming from a smaller school in Wyoming and you have to take charge, be that leader, that captain of the defense, just like that. Okay. Because these guys have just had some, a day or two to kind of get familiar with one another, going through some meetings. And he said, you just have to be the guy. And you can't be afraid that if you see something that's not right in the alignment, or you see something that's not being done correctly, don't be afraid to point out. We're all trying to get better. We're all trying to win. And he said that that's the take charge approach you have to have if you're going to be in the middle of that defense. So obviously a big week for him because he's going up in that stage, going up in the round, so to speak, up in weight class, I guess you could say. So just definitely an interesting note on movement there, but a nice note from your standpoint about what he did on the field today.
Were there any like anecdotes from post practice player availability that stood out? Was there one in particular that kind of caught your ear?
Muma was good. Sam Howell, North Carolina quarterback, he's someone who lost 2 running backs and 2 receivers to the draft last year. And he said that kind of put some added pressure on him, and it forced him to feel like he had to do more in the offense. And instead of just staying within himself and doing his job, he felt pressed throughout the course of the 2021 season. So it was interesting to hear that standpoint of how he approached his final year on campus. One player who I enjoyed hearing from was Jalen Tolbert, wide receiver from South Alabama. You noted he had a big play earlier in the day, and this is his home stadium. He didn't have to go very far for the Senior Bowl, but it was interesting hearing him obviously talk about, like Muma going up a weight class and taking on this different level of competition. But you would enjoy getting to talk with him, and I hope when we have the media breakfast on Wednesday, you take the opportunity to, because he was asked, what's your favorite play? What's your favorite route to run? And he goes into what's the situation? What's the down and distance? What's the coverage? It's like he wasn't going to make it simple. And you could tell that he's an X's and O's junkie. So definitely hope that you get some time to spend with him this week to get to chat with him. But following up on, who stood out, I don't know about improving stock, but a player who flashed, I'm going to stick with edge rushers here with an interesting backstory that I know that you've shared with fans on the podcast. Dominique Robinson, Miami of Ohio. I was just watching the O-line, D-line 101s, and you're just seeing number 11 just flash off the edge, off both sides, comfortable coming off the right edge, coming off the left edge, just a lot of juice coming off the edge. And then in team drills later on, noted that he paired to be able to create pressure in the backfield to help generate a sack. So someone who doesn't have a lot of experience, as a pass rusher, started his college career as a wide receiver, was a starting wide receiver at Miami of Ohio, making the transition. And I think you said he's never started at edge rusher, but definitely, showing the tools that are going to make teams take a step back and think to themselves, we might have something in a sub-package rusher here. So very intrigued there by Dominique Robinson from what I saw in practice.
Yeah, Robinson had himself a day. We talked about him a little bit earlier with Dane.
Gotcha.
A really impressive outing from a guy that hasn't played a ton along the defensive line. So this week, obviously a huge opportunity. Let's get back to the offensive side of the football. Good question here from Tomcat 1978. And the question is, what quarterback shined and has the chance of upping their draft stock? And obviously that's going to be one of the big questions surrounding the week. And kind of basically what we said earlier in the segment, I thought it seemed like it was a funny little like 3 or 4 minute stretch for me sitting and watching the second practice. And it was the American team. So the quarterbacks were Malik Willis, Sam Howell, and Bailey Zappi. And I had a media, when you're sitting in the stands at the Senior Bowl and watching practice, people are coming and going all the time. So, some people sit down, they spend a few minutes with you and you go, I like to stay stationary and stay put, but a lot of people are mobile. They're trying to bounce around, talk to a lot of different people. And so you have one person will come up and point to a quarterback and say, oh, Malik Willis, he's having a hell of a day, huh? The ball really pops. He's had a couple really good throws, and then he gets up and walks away. And then you have somebody else that come over after Malik Willis said there's an incompletion and say, oh, Malik Willis, he's really struggled in some of the throws that I've seen, right? Like to look at a quarterback after a few throws and say, oh, this guy had a great day. And some people will say, oh, this guy had a rough day. They have like 60, 70, 80 throws in a given practice. They're going to base it off of, 5, 10 throws that they saw and say, oh, this guy was really good or really, really bad. And I think it's kind of a really good microcosm of what we're talking about here with some of these, the big takeaways. But I will say that when you look at Malik Willis, the ball just pops out of his hand. I would say the same thing, Carson Strong. Both guys, they threw it really, really well today. When you look at velocity and the arm strength aspect of things, I thought Kenny Pickett was probably the most even of all the quarterbacks, but I think you could see some of the traits really kind of rise to the top there with Willis and with Strong.
Yeah, I agree with that. With Willis, there was 2 plays back-to-back that I noted. One, he showed the ability to get to the edge, throw the ball on the run, be able to create out of the pocket, and that's something that he showed time and time again at Liberty. On the very next play, he's in the pocket gets a little muddy, gets a little pressure, and he didn't set his feet correctly, and the throw was off, and it was Cam Taylor-Britt from Nebraska. Should have come up with the interception, or was very close to coming up with the interception. And it just shows those are like the little finite details that he has to work on. Carson Strong lives up to the billing when it comes to arm strength. He was willing to showcase it with throws 45, 50 yards down the field. I thought Bailey Zappi had some good throws, some tightrope throws into close windows. So I thought we saw some good things across the board. I agree with you on Pickett. But overall, it seems like what we expected from these quarterbacks coming into the event.
I would say one of the things that I think people think about Pickett is like, oh, he's pocket passer that doesn't really have a strong arm. Like, oh, he's kind of a gamer. And the ball comes out of his hand pretty good. He had some really nice throws in the middle of the field today. There was a deep dig off play action that he threw. The ball comes out of his hand pretty good. So I would not say that he's got like a cannon for an arm, but he doesn't have a weak arm either. I think when you look at Kenny Pickett, he can make
I thought it's funny you said. Even in the warmups, I was like, he's putting some zip on the ball. I'm like, I wonder if he's trying to prove a point, because everyone, it's like you have to see the other quarterbacks, lining up next to him. Carson Strong, it's kind of like, all right, Carson Strong is known to have this strong arm. I got to come out and show something here. So I thought definitely early on he was trying to put some heat on those throws to showcase that he does have a live arm.
I like that. All right, well, let's get to the next one here. This one comes from at Eagles Dad 73. Said, who is today's most impressive wide receivers and pass rushers? Well, we talked through some of the pass rushers. We haven't talked through many of the receivers yet, C-Mac, and I don't know if there were any guys that stood out to you. For me, I'll pick one from each team. A guy that stood out for me with the national squad, North Dakota State wide receiver Christian Watson, I thought was the most even of the receivers with that group. Number one, really looks the part. I think when you talk about a guy that's well put together, 6'3", even came in at the weigh-ins and over 200 pounds. He moves well. He got in and out of breaks well. The ball rarely hit the ground, was targeted a ton, both in team and in individuals. I thought Watson had a good day. And then with the American squad, you're talking about different ends of the spectrum from a body type standpoint. Christian Watson, 6'3", 200 plus. Calvin Austin is like 5'7", 170, somewhere in that range. I mean, he is small, but man, he battles really well. They did a lot of like blocking drills with the receivers and corners with that practice, and he competed really, really well. I know he had some good reps against McCreary. He had some good reps against Cam Taylor-Britt, right? Some of the more physical corners on that squad. But then also the ball never hit the ground with him, and he's one of the more dynamic pass catchers here in attendance. You talk about guys that have top speed. He's got that ability to pull away. So a couple of receivers there that really stood out. Honestly, when you look at this receiver group, the more impressive guys, in my opinion, are the guys that come outside of the Power Five. It's like you're seeing, Memphis and North Dakota State. You talked about Jalen Tolbert earlier, who had an outstanding catch down the field on a go ball down the right sideline. It was it kind of drew some oohs and ahs from the crowd right in his home stadium. So you talk about guys that outside of the Power Five, well represented here at the receiver group at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, I agree with you on Watson. I think he's listed at 6'4". There were some articles that thought he might be 6'5", and it's like if he could move like that at 6'4", 6'5", but he came in at a true 6'3", and
which is still pretty big. Like 6'3" is a good size.
Big, fluid. Just in the individual warm-up period, you could see him running the breaks and getting in and out of his breaks cleanly. No, I would say Watson was one who flashed to me. There wasn't really anyone else that really jumped out to me here from the wide receiver standpoint.
You did a lot of the edge work, and that was the next question we got was at walk_FF asking about the top edge rusher. We talked about Jermaine Johnson, Dominique Robinson. You mentioned Kingsley Anubari, so a bunch of guys standing out from that group. Francesco De Sanctis asked, who were the corners and wide receivers that stood out most? We've talked through a couple of those already. Watson and Austin at corner. Castro Fields made some plays. I thought Cam Taylor-Britt was really interesting. He did some really good things from Nebraska. I would say that I'm trying to think if there was anybody else that really, really stood out. McCreary did McCreary things in one-on-ones. Roger McCreary, one of the top prospects here, the corner from Auburn. Most people think he will be a first-round pick. So I think when you look at McCreary, hard to think that he did anything other than not stand out this game. I don't know if there were any corners that stood out to you, C-Mac, over the course of the day.
The one I have a note here from Kobe Bryant, a nice pass breakup. There was a deep pass. It was Carson Strong going to his college teammate Romeo Dubes, and Kobe Bryant did a great job. A bit of a moon ball hanging up there a bit, but Kobe Bryant, stayed with Dubes in coverage and was able to make the play to get the ball on the ground. Thought he did a good job there. A couple of the other linemen I want to touch on real quick. I don't know if we have any other interior linemen for the defense or offensive linemen here. I haven't talked about them a whole lot.
Sure.
But Zion Robinson, Boston College, absolute just monster.
Zion Johnson.
Zion Johnson. I'm sorry, Zion Johnson. My fault. Zion Johnson, Boston College, just absolute beast. People don't know what a phone booth is anymore, but able just to stand up his man. Once he got his hands on someone, not going anywhere. Thought he was just real tough. He was playing the guard spots here. This was O-line, D-line 101s here. Thought he worked tremendously on the inside because I believe you and Ben had talked about that he's been a tackle. He's moved back and forth from tackle to guards, trying to find where he works best. Just rock solid there at the guard spot. So very impressed with him. UCLA's Otito Ogbonia, I thought was very powerful. You had an interesting comp when we were talking about him during the course of practice out there today.
Yeah, Johnson, I've talked about him a number of times, and the big thing that has always stood out to me is just how well he's built. But I compared him to Shaq Mason while studying him on film. This was a couple of years ago at Boston College. Johnson, he's just a really impressive player. He just does a lot at a high level and really athletic, really strong. We've had Brandon Thorne on in the past, and he talked about how he was one of his favorite linemen in this draft. And showing off that versatility today, as we talked about earlier with Dane, playing some center. I think that's been big for him here this week, and going to be big for him moving forward. Just that proven versatility, the ability to play all three offensive line positions. A couple more questions here that we got, C-Mac. This one comes from Makarov _ who asks, with Jaquan Brisker, the Penn State safety, apparently opting out of the Senior Bowl, who are the top safeties are any projected to go in the top 2 rounds? So I think the big thing to note is that not only did Brisker choose not to come down to this game, but also that you got to remember that Brian Cook, the star safety from Cincinnati, he also did not make the trip down. I think that was due to injury, as Jim Nagy talked about earlier this week here on the show. So they lose their top 2 safeties. I think when you look at the safety depth in the senior class, there's a lot of questions in terms of how high are these guys going to get drafted? I would say Kirby Joseph, by most analysts. I know Dane Brugler is really, really high on Kirby Joseph from Illinois, that he might be potentially the top safety. But it's going to be interesting to see if any of those other guys kind of set themselves apart. I thought we saw some flashes from Texas A&M's Leon O'Neal today. He played with some really good energy. I think when you look at Jalen Petrie from Baylor, he's a certain kind of player. He's played more in the box and in the slot as opposed to playing deep, but he's a player to keep an eye on. JT Woods, his teammate at Baylor, kind of that ball hawking center fielder type. He has made some plays in coverage over the course of his career, and he did today. He had some nice flashes. Other than that, you're talking about a lot of guys that are converted corners that potentially could make that move. So it'll be interesting to follow here, Makarov. It's a good question in terms of the safeties here at the Senior Bowl and who is projected to go highly. C-Mac, any other takeaways from you from today before we shut this one down from just today's practice?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. Nice work by the O-line, D-line. Again, a lot of those edge guys I was definitely impressed by. We saw some good promising things from the quarterback. So some really good things overall to build on as we go into day 2 to see who can carry the momentum and do it on a consistent basis. That's going to be intriguing to see.
You want one more thing I have written down that I didn't bring up. Alante Taylor, the corner from Tennessee, who ironically enough, we were just talking about safety. Some people think could make that move to safety. The book on Alante Taylor, really tough, physical, scrappy, very, very competitive, very, very physical. Like that's his hallmark. That's what he hangs his hat on. He takes a lot of pride in that part of his game also, for what it's worth. But when you talk about Alante Taylor, the question is, does he have that long speed? Does he have that ability to play man-to-man? Like, is that going to be something that holds him back from playing corner in the NFL? One of these things that I love about coming to the Senior Bowl, especially, you get close to the field and you get a sense of how these guys practice and how they kind of conduct themselves. Number one, not only was Alante Taylor one of the first guys kind of leading a lot of those DB drills for that squad, but also it was early on. They were doing an individual drill. And the coach was getting ready to move them to the next drill. They were getting ready to start the next set of reps. And Alante Taylor had noticed that one of the guys had not taken a rep yet. And he kind of yelled over to the coach, "Hey, coach, we need to get this guy a rep." And he was like, "Oh, you're right. Alante, good call. And brought the guy in." So you're talking about just, getting a sense of, it doesn't mean that just that one individual moment doesn't define Alontae Taylor and say, oh, this guy is A+++, right? But it's just one of those little instances where that's something to just kind of file away. And as you get more information about a guy, you get more experience, more exposure to a player, it helps to paint the picture. And so those are the kinds of things that I always appreciate from coming to events like this one.
It reminds me of after Devontae Smith was drafted, and you go into the first team workouts after he joined the team, and he's the first in line for wide receiver drills. Like, not wasting any time, being the alpha in the room. Like, he's lined up, ready to go. Those are the little things that you try to pick up. After a guy has a great play, a bad play, how do they react? How do they interact with their teammates? Those are the little things that you're trying to pick up on during the course of the week.
And those, again, that individual moment doesn't like make or break whether a guy is going to succeed or whether he's going to fail, or is he this or is he that. But it's just one other little thing to say, all right, like to help paint the picture of the player. I thought that was kind of an interesting takeaway there. I wanted to make sure I shared that little anecdote from early on in practice. Last question here, and this is kind of big picture, and I thought this would be interesting to just kind of close the discussion on. T. Bolt 10, the longtime listener, Taylor Bolton, said this question. You always talk about how there's no perfect coverage in football because if there was, then every team would play it. If teams have the talent and the fits schematically to play pure man versus pure zone coverage, of course, knowing that all teams already play some of both, which would be the preferred scheme? I asked because when it seems that when scouting corners, the goal for a lot of people is to find long press corners, but the Eagles played mostly too deep off zone coverage last year. So wouldn't a corner like Clemson's Andrew Booth, who played mostly off zone, be a better fit than, say, Ahmad Gardner in the current scheme? Ahmad Gardner from Cincinnati. Taylor, it's a really good question. And it's obviously a big picture kind of conversation. Without getting too deep into the weeds here, I think the big thing to remember when you're talking about corners, especially corners, we've had so many scouts on every single week here on the podcast in our Scout Story segment, and especially with the defensive side, what have we heard so often is you have to try and get a sense of not just what a player was asked to do in college, but what can he do moving forward. So if you look at Andrew Booth and say, okay, well, this year he played a lot of off-zone coverage. Does he have the ability to play press zone? Does he have the ability to play press man? Can he play off man? Right? Like you have to get that sense of, and the only way you can kind of answer that is A, just keep watching more and more and more film, or B, you put him through the paces in a private workout or in the combine workout and try and glean as much information as you can from those situations, or in an all-star game setting like this one. Right. But even if you did say, hey, if all things are equal, if all things are perfect, you have all the right players to play man and all the right players to be able to play zone, at the end of the day, even with a level playing field, there are still pluses and minuses to both, right? And you can get very smart, accomplished, winning coaches, defensive coaches, some of the best in the league, and say like, hey, like, do you want to play all man or do you want to play all zone? And you can get two completely different answers because it's not just a schematic or a trait-based discussion. It's not just, oh, well, if you don't have the guys to play man, you can't play man. It's also like if you play a lot of man, well, you're going to see certain kinds of routes that attack man coverage. If you play a lot of zone, you're going to see a lot of different kind of routes that attack the kind of zone coverage that you play. So even if you did say, hey, we've got 5 Jalen Ramseys in the secondary, right? Well, you're still going to, if you want to play all man, you're going to see a lot of man beating concepts and different ways to be able to get guys open against man. And that's whenever I say there is no perfect coverage, that's really what I mean, is that schematically, there are ways to attack everything that you do. And it works both ways. No matter what you do in football, there's always an answer. There's always something that can be your antidote for what you're trying to bring to the table. And so it's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it. At corner, especially, it's always a lot of fun. And you just have to remember that what a guy was asked to do, especially when you talk about cornerback techniques. I was actually talking with a coach today, a defensive coach at the college level in the stands watching practice. And we were just talking about it, his team and how they played. And I asked him, I was like, hey, when with your corners, do you give them the flexibility to be able to, kind of decide how off the line of scrimmage they're going to play? Or do you kind of dictate, hey, on this play call with this kind of situation, we want you to be, if you're playing off coverage, make sure you're within 6 yards, or we want you to be pressed up on the line of scrimmage, or do you kind of give them the flexibility? He said, no, we give them the flexibility. Are there times where you have coaches yelling, hey, get a little tighter? Sure. But you want to leave that up to the player, and they have a better feel for where they want to be. So you also have to remember that when evaluating these guys too, is that, sometimes it changes team by team. Some teams dictate how they want you to be able to play on a certain call. So something to watch there as well. I thought that was a good question. I want to make sure we got that in there, C-Mac.
Great question. I want to add, when you have looking at the Eagles as they're currently constructed, and you have someone like a Darius Slay, and Darius Slay would go to the coaches, Jonathan Gannon, each week and be like, what do you need me to do this week? It's nice to have a Darius Slay, someone of that upper echelon type of player that you could start your game plan and say, okay, what can we do with him? What do we need Slay to do? Because he could do a little of everything, and then kind of take it from there. And then you have someone who's willing, like Darius Slay is, to be able to go out there and whatever assignment. Do you want me to shadow someone? Do you want me to stay to his side? Do whatever. He's willing to do it, whatever he can to help the team win.
And that's the thing. And I remember talking with Jonathan Gannon earlier this season about Darius Slay. We talked about, it was a discussion we had over on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast about Darius, about big play Slay. And the conversation circled around how when you have a corner that gives you that flexibility, Darius Slay is one of a handful of corners in the NFL that at a high level can play press man, off man, zone from press, and zone from off, and be able to say, check all those boxes and do them all at a high level. Is he going to get beat? Yeah, there are times you're going to get beat. You're playing corner in the NFL, but when you are a corner and you have that, you can do all of those things. Oh, and you could tackle. Oh, and you could play the ball in the air. Like, there aren't a lot of those guys walking around. And so when you have a guy like Slay, that gives that defensive coordinator a lot of flexibility and a lot of confidence going into a game plan. And those guys, that's why those guys are so valuable. We've talked about that a lot. It's a good conversation to have. But C-Mac, we've got a lot more action to break down here over the course of the week. Hopefully things stay dry. We talked about that earlier with Dane. Hopefully things stay dry here the rest of the week. But we'll be back tomorrow, hopefully, on the Journey of the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand.